What's food got to do with air? What if the steak on your plate, the milk in your coffee, or even the protein bar in your bag wasn't grown on a farm or harvested from the ocean, but made out of thin air? Yeah, you heard me right, thin air. It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, but this sci-fi is becoming science fact as we speak. Hey there, tech enthusiasts. Welcome to Not So Techie. Here at Not So Techie, we're dedicated to exploring the latest and greatest in technology and scientific breakthroughs. Our mission? To make the world of tech accessible to everyone by breaking down complex topics into straightforward, easy-to-understand videos. If you have an interest in a particular topic, let us know in the comments below. All right, let's jump into it. A handful of biotech companies are using bacteria to convert carbon dioxide, protein-rich food, is being turned into nutritious meals in futuristic fermentation tanks. But is this really a game changer for food production and the environment, or just another tech buzzword? Let's break it all down. We'll talk about what's behind the science, who's leading the charge, and, most importantly, whether this is the future of food. Because let's be real, this raises a big question. Are we actually ready to shift away from traditional farming to embrace food made by bacteria? Where did this idea come from, anyway? Let's rewind for a second because this all started decades ago thanks to NASA. Back in the 1960s, NASA scientists were working on ways to feed astronauts during deep space missions. They explored this idea of using bacteria, specifically types that feed on carbon dioxide and other gases, to create a food source. They wanted a self-sufficient system, one that wouldn't require supply rockets filled with food. Cool concept, right? Well, it didn't take off for space travel. But now, 60 years later, that same idea is being reimagined for an entirely new mission, feeding billions of people here on Earth sustainably. Here's the problem. By 2050, the world's population is expected to jump to nearly 10 billion people. That's a lot of mouths to feed. But agriculture, as we know, it is struggling. Livestock farming, for example, uses a ton of land and even more water. So here we are, looking at this big, looming question. How do we meet this huge demand for food without overwhelming the planet? And one solution might actually be bacteria. Instead of growing crops over acres of land or raising animals in confined, resource-heavy farms, we could just grow food in fermentation tanks. You know, kind of like how we make beer. Only, these tanks aren't making alcohol. They're making protein. And the twist? They're using carbon dioxide to do it. The science of turning air into food. So, let's talk about how this works because honestly, it sounds pretty wild. How do you take something like CO2, which is literally a waste product, and turn it into something edible? This is where bacteria, or microbes, step in as the superheroes. Certain types of bacteria, called autotrophs, can survive on nothing but air and a few nutrients. Here's how it works. Companies like Nova Nutrients and Solar Foods use these bacteria and feed them carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Think of it as their meal. The bacteria grow and reproduce rapidly, like incredibly fast, and in no time, you're left with a protein-rich biomass. Picture it, a massive fermentation tank bubbling away. Inside it, these bacteria are hard at work, but instead of brewing beer or wine, it's producing food. This food, which is essentially a fine powder packed with amino acids, vitamins, and fiber, can be molded into meat substitutes, dairy-free milk, or even protein bars. The beauty of this process is its efficiency. Traditional crops take months to grow, right? These bacteria can double in size in just hours. Plus, because this takes place in tanks, it doesn't require farmland, good weather, or even ideal soil conditions. And it's not just fast. It's also resource-light. Growing just 1 pound of beef, for example, takes a ridiculous amount of land and water. But with these tanks, none of that's needed. This makes microbial farming not just efficient, but also way cleaner and more sustainable. Meet the pioneers turning this vision into reality. At this point, you might be wondering, who's actually doing this? And is it working? One of the leading companies in this space is called Air Protein. It was founded by Dr. Lisa Dyson, who actually took inspiration from NASA's original experiments. Her company asked the big question, what if we could recreate this closed-loop system on Earth? Air Protein uses fermentation tanks to grow meat, specifically a product they call air chicken. Yep, it's a chicken alternative that's designed to taste and look just like the real deal. They've already built their first air farm in California and partnered with ADM, one of the biggest names in agriculture, to scale up production. Their goal? To make these meat alternatives affordable, accessible, and sustainable. Another key player is a company out of Finland called Solar Foods. These guys are taking a different route. Instead of focusing on meat alternatives, they've created a product called Solian. Imagine an all-purpose protein powder, but instead of coming from wheat, it's grown from microbes that eat hydrogen and CO2. Solar Foods already has a pilot facility up and running, and their product has been approved for sale in Singapore. Lastly, there's Nova Nutrients. What makes them unique is that they're using carbon dioxide from industrial waste streams, basically emissions from factories, and turning those emissions into protein. Nova Nutrients is tackling food production and industrial pollution at the same time. Their flagship product, Novodian, is aimed not just at human food but even at animal feed. Each of these companies is approaching things slightly differently, but they're all working toward the same big idea, turning waste into food. The environmental upside and the challenges ahead. Now let's talk about one of the most exciting parts of this, the environment. Compared to traditional farming, bacterial protein production is an absolute game changer. Check this out. It uses 99% less land. Yes, 99%. It also uses 99% less water. And because it's capturing carbon dioxide instead of releasing it, the process emits way fewer greenhouse gases. Think about how much land is dedicated to farming right now. If we could shift even a fraction of that to microbial farming, we could reclaim all that space, let forests grow back, restore ecosystems, and give wildlife their habitats back. Another huge advantage? This process is completely weatherproof. Traditional agriculture is at the mercy of climate change. Things like droughts, floods, or extreme heat can destroy a crop. But fermentation tanks? Those are designed for stability. Not to mention, they can be placed anywhere, even in urban areas or deserts. That said, this isn't an easy solution. One of the biggest challenges right now is cost. Growing protein with microbes is still more expensive than farming crops or livestock. However, the hope is that as these companies scale up, the cost will come down. Another hurdle is regulation. Singapore is the first country to approve microbial food for sale, but big markets like the US and Europe haven't fully caught up yet. And of course, there's the whole issue of consumer perception. Let's be real. Food made by bacteria isn't exactly appetizing by name alone. Convincing people to jump on board will take time and smart marketing. What's next? And are we ready? So, what does the future of microbial protein look like? Well, many experts believe it's just a matter of time before this becomes a mainstream food source. By 2030, companies like Nova Nutrients, Air Protein, and Solar Foods might be up and running at full scale, and their products could replace major environmental offenders like soy, fish meal, and even beef. Imagine that. Cities growing their own food locally, factories capturing CO2 and turning it into protein, and countries with extreme climates producing their own food instead of relying on imports. But the big question is, are we ready for this shift? It's not just about the technology, it's about society. Are people willing to embrace food made by microbes if it means a healthier planet? That's where you come in. Would you eat a burger or even a snack bar made from air? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're curious for more, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and check out the links below for more information on Air Protein, Nova Nutrients, and Solar Foods. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious.